Welcome to Beyond Names. I am Dr. Habib. This is a space for spiritual seekers and soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, and for those grounded in a tradition, and for those who are not sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine God, Yahweh, Allah, Brahman, Elohim, Great Spirit, higher power, or you're non-theistic, you are still searching for language that fits. In all cases, you are welcome here. Together, we'll explore the intersection of spirituality in daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that each of us carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with introduction with our conversation partner for this episode, Margaret Cullen. Margaret Cullen is a licensed psychotherapist. She's the founder of Compassion Corps and founding faculty of the Compassion Institute. She also serves on the advisory board of the Global Compassion Coalition. Her book, Quiet Strength: Find Peace, Feel Alive, and Love Boundlessly Through the Power of Equanimity, comes out in March and is available for pre-order now. To learn more about Margaret and her work, please visit Margaret Cullen, CULLEN.com. Margaret, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Habib. It's really an honor.
Well, it was such a treat to get to know you a bit when you were in the process of working on your book. So it's nice to reconnect. Would you please tell us, just introduce yourself to our listeners by giving us a little bit of your spiritual story?
I was pretty excited to see that as a possible question in this interview. I don't think I've ever discussed it in any public forum before.
Mm,
Um, so that's a little scary, but also exciting for me because it's very, very meaningful to me.
mm, yeah.
Um, and as I told you in our conversation before you started recording, it's a bit of a long story. I'm going to try to make it as digestible as I can. I was born uh, in Connecticut, and I was confirmed in a Protestant church. And my maiden name was Margaret Ann Nelson. And I never really felt like that identity fit very well for me.
Mm,
Um, then, fast forward to my early 30s, I was on a meditation retreat. I had been meditating for several years at that point already.
mm,
This was a 10-day silent retreat, and I'd never had visualizations before. This is Vipassana or mindfulness meditation. It's about being present with what's here. It's not really kind of aiming for mystical experiences per se. So
mm,
this was unusual. Every time I sat down to meditate, and this was 8 or 10 times a day for 10 days in silence, I would have visions of rabbis,
mm,
and they were angry, and they were like on either shoulder, and they were in traditional dress with the curls and the shawls and everything.
mhm,
And it was just really odd. And from a mindfulness perspective, I would just notice them. I
mhm,
didn't engage with them. I would just notice them. And that happened throughout the retreat, the 10-day retreat. And Vipassana, which is a particular kind of meditation practice, means to see clearly. And it's sometimes translated as insight practice. It's the technology of Vipassana meditation is designed to help you have insights, both into your personal history, but also into the nature of reality. So at the end of this retreat, I had an insight. It was very powerful. And the insight was that the rabbis were angry because the rabbinical chain had been broken with my generation. And the
Mm,
insight was that my mother's father was a rabbi. I was never told I was Jewish. I was
mm,
raised a Protestant, and that his father was also a rabbi. So I went to see my mother, who was living in San Francisco with her Presbyterian third husband. And I pulled her aside. I said, Mom, I was on this retreat. I had an insight. We're actually Jewish, aren't we? And she said, yes. So now I'm 33 or so, and this is the first time anybody's told me this. I said, and your father was a rabbi? And she said, yes. And I said, and his father was a rabbi? And she said, yes. And she started crying in a way I'd never seen her cry before. And she said, yes, 50 generations of rabbis back to King David. I
wow.
miss my people.
Mm,
And please don't tell my husband we're Jewish.
mm,
So a lot of things started making sense to me. I'm now 33, and oh, not only am I Jewish,
mm,
but it's a pretty heavy duty Jewish lineage that I come from, that my mother, with the best intentions, kind of single-handedly put her thumbs in the dam, and stopped that as best she could, broke the chain.
yeah.
Um, so fast forward, I met my husband in my late 30s. He's Jewish. He was interested in my Jewish heritage. I had never met any of my extended family. That was part of how my mother kept this secret.
Mm,
And he said, let's go find them. So together we went to New York, and I found a cousin who was a kind of family historian, a first cousin.
mhm.
And he brought out these two, they're very heavy, these two books. And I don't know if you can see them, but it says The Unbroken Chain.
Yes.
So it's all genealogy. It's volume 1 and volume 2 of my family.
Wow.
And it goes to me. I'm in the book, goes to my generation.
Wow.
And it was a remarkable validation of a spiritual insight, because the language was exactly, the chain has been broken. And then I'm presented 5 years later with The Unbroken Chain, volumes 1 and 2, this is, by the way, it's just genealogy. So this is several thousand pages. It's just listings of names and families and
Mm,
all these rabbis, including in my family, the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder really of mystical Judaism, um, who, yeah, and a
wow.
number of, very mystical rabbis.
Mm,
And in
mm,
fact, from my mother's mother came from a dynasty, a Hasidic dynasty that goes through the Baal Shem Tov, and my mother's father from an Orthodox dynasty. And it was the marriage, an unusual marriage of an Orthodox and Hasidic dynasty in my mother's parents. And I
mm.
was raised in the Congregational Church. So, so
Wow.
that's my spiritual story.
Well, I want to know more, and if you don't feel comfortable uh, saying more, but do you, now that you know this, do you identify as following Judaism, or do you identify as following Buddhism, or do you identify where is your, do you mind vocating yourself?
Not at all, no. Um, I identify as a Jew because technically I am a Jew. And,
Okay.
if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. And not only was she Jewish, I fully acknowledge and embrace and um, am in somewhat in awe of
Mm,
my lineage.
yes.
And I um, have tried really hard, especially for my beloved husband, to practice Judaism, but it's never really taken for me. Um,
Mm,
there are obstacles, and my heart is really in on the Buddhist path, where
hmm
I've never really encountered an obstacle. It just kind of keeps opening and opening and opening. And it is the widest, biggest path I've found. And I'm
hmm
a very restless, skeptical, questioning person,
hmm
and I need a very wide path.
hmm Yeah.
So Buddhism has worked for me. And I
Uh-huh.
do feel like I'm expressing my heritage, my spiritual heritage, through my Buddhist teaching and writing,
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
lot of other Jubus, let me just say.
I've never heard that term before, and I don't know if it's okay for me to say it, as it's not falling into that category.
Yeah, I don't know if you're allowed to, but I
I,
think I am.
you are allowed to, absolutely. With lineage like that, and I know you're obviously your Buddhist credentials, you've got a lot of experience, and just the insight meditation that and the insight that you had from doing so is amazing. So, and I have to ask because you mentioned the mysticism aspect in your lineage. Have you, where are you, or where do you locate yourself in relation to mysticism, um, in in Judaism or outside of Judaism?
I think life would be very limited and bland and um, impoverished
Mm,
without mysticism,
mhm.
um, for me personally.
Yeah.
Um, I was thinking about your question about what is spirituality, and
Mhm.
is it okay
Absolutely.
if
Yes.
I link it there? I
Of
I
course.
hadn't really, oddly, I'd never defined it for myself before.
Mm,
So thank you for the question. And I realized for me, it, among other things, it involves mystery, and
mhm,
they have the same root, mysticism and mystery. They are
mhm,
really connected in my heart and mind, an
mhm,
openness to mystery, to
mhm.
things that, it's totally illogical that these rabbis visited me while I sat in Northern California on a zafu in silence. How did
Yes.
that happen? Um, and I got this message, um, and quite honestly, along with my Buddhist practice, like a lot of other Jubus, I did 20 years of work with a shaman, in a very kind of intentional, ritualistic way, working with psychedelic medicines.
Mm,
And so that was another connection to the mystery and to mysticism
mhm.
and to kind of what is beyond everyday consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we started recording, as you know, I shared with you how part of my impetus is this desire to bring a sense of unity and this desire to, part of that is I feel like that we culturally and collectively, humanity is in need of spiritual awakening. But what occurred to me is when you're sharing your story and you're talking about doing mindfulness meditation, and the insight that came from you from your mindfulness meditation is about your Jewish lineage and the accuracy of the insight. For me, that's just a testament to the unity. It's a testament to us awakening our hearts to openness to what is common amongst our paths and our interconnection and our interbeing and our allowing these differences that we get so hung up on to fade into the background. So I love your story, and I love that it has such a pivotal and powerful moment in it that for me, I'm receiving that as a testament to unity. So,
I agree with you completely. And as you know, I interviewed you for my book on equanimity. I interviewed faith leaders in many traditions, and I found exactly the same thing. So
yeah.
my through line was equanimity. And sure enough, there it was in Islam and Christianity and Judaism, in certainly in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in Taoism, Confucianism,
Yeah.
Stoicism,
Yes.
and these, in Buddhism, equanimity is one of the four fundamental virtues or immeasurables. And the other ones, I think, equally go across all traditions. We
Mm,
were talking earlier, compassion, loving kindness,
yes.
uh, the the generosity, the well-wishing for others, and equanimity. None of these are owned or proprietary, as far as I
Mhm.
can tell.
Right.
They're shared equally across all these great wisdom traditions.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that reminds me just to go. I'm going to digress for a moment. But one of the previous conversation partners for the podcast is Yuval Ron, and I don't know if you have heard of him, but he talked about in doing his work, which is he's a composer, but he talked about in his episode the effort it took for him to come up with music that represented equanimity. So when you get a chance, you'll have to check
Oh,
out. You'll have to
oh
check.
yes. Please do send me his name. I
Okay,
would really absolutely love to hear that. I'm
all I
very
have to do is check the transcript for that episode because he mentions
okay.
that album in his episode. But he has an album where he was asked to create music for loving kindness,
Oh,
when it, to for the four key. I'm forgetting the
for
term.
Brahma Viharas or
Yes, yes,
immeasurables. Yes.
yes, the four immeasurables. Um, so
What
yeah,
is his name?
Yuval,
Oh,
Yuval, Ron. Yeah.
yes. Right. I recognize that name. Okay, great. Wonderful.
It just occurred to me that, oh, he's made music and he specifically talked in his episode. It's called The Four Divine States of Mind is the name of the album.
I love that. You
Yeah.
know, I was talking, was it last night or the night before? The night before last with a friend who's a cellist in the San Francisco Symphony.
Mm,
And we were talking about equanimity in music. And she was talking about Bach and how his music is full of equanimity. And
mm,
I bring it up here because Bach was very religious,
mm.
actually.
Yeah.
And religion infuses his music. And it was, in many ways, his faith, his
Uh-huh.
capacity to take refuge in his faith that
Hmm.
granted him the kind of perspective and openness and depth that is representative of equanimity that you hear in his music, the
Hmm.
music of Bach.
Wonderful. Yeah. That brings a beautiful perspective to his music and his creative potential and abilities. So thank you for that. So speaking of equanimity, would you like to share a passage from your book on equanimity?
I would love to. Thank you. Yes. So it kind of ties in, I think, with my story because
Mhm.
it's it's the opening of my book. It's the opening of the first chapter,
Mhm.
and it's a story from another silent meditation retreat.
Wonderful.
And and it is a different kind of revelation. In this
Mm,
case, it was a revelation about equanimity, you know,
mm,
that which is why it's the opening of my book on equanimity. Um, so I think I'll actually start. The epigram for this chapter is a quote from one of my Buddhist teachers, Matthew Brensilver. I love this quote. I think it captures something really important about equanimity.
mm,
And he wrote, equanimity deepens the poignancy of our lives, but drains our lives of melodrama. And I love that quote because it challenges the idea that equanimity is aloof, that it's
mhm,
distant, when
mhm,
actually it deepens how moved we are, but it takes away all the reactivity,
mhm,
the
mhm,
static in a way, that gets in the way of clear seeing and skillful responding. Okay, so this isn't too long. Here we go. We're in the third week of a silent meditation retreat in Yucca Valley near Joshua Tree in the high desert of Southern California. The hard work of settling my tired, anxious, and distracted mind and body is behind me, and mindfulness has become effortless and self-sustaining. I'm walking in the early morning. It's springtime, and the desert is bursting with life. Sights, sounds, smells, and thoughts appear at each sense door with the vibrancy that borders on the psychedelic. Layers of grime, defenses, and preconceptions have been lifted not only from my senses, but also from my guarded heart, leaving it vulnerable to the tender beauty of each cottontail and cactus flower that sparkles with life in the arid desert landscape. The spring is so fleeting here, so unexpected, so beautiful. After spending a week practicing loving kindness, Sharon Salzberg has taught us equanimity as a balancing practice. Equanimity is one of a set of wholesome and skillful states of mind that can be cultivated with the help of specific practices. One way of developing equanimity is by silently repeating phrases that serve as guideposts and incline the mind toward that skillful state. Here's the phrase we use to cultivate equanimity as we wish others well. Your happiness or unhappiness is more a function of your thoughts and actions than of my wishes for you. And yet I will never cease to wish for your happiness. I've been sitting with this phrase for several days, directing it toward loved ones, strangers, challenging people, and all beings, and so it's begun to have a life of its own. As I walk in the desert, the phrase comes into my mind and is quickly followed by a deeply felt sense of my mother. In the next instant, an insight arises that uncorks a volcano of emotion so strong, I'm afraid it might blow me to smithereens. For the first time in my life, I experienced directly that not only am I not responsible for my mother's happiness, but also what's even more amazing, I can let go of this futile enterprise without forsaking my love for her. I suddenly understand they're not mutually exclusive. I had agreed sometime deep in my childhood to an invisible contract with my mother that it was my job to save her from the profound depression and mental illness that had haunted her throughout her life. I had fully believed in the false dichotomy that to forsake this sacred duty was to stop loving her. A lifelong contract signed in invisible blood between a little girl at an age so young I can't even remember, and her parent, that committed the girl to be the one thing standing between her mother and the abyss of her depression and mental illness. This little girl, a ray of sunshine, lifeline, and only hope, didn't even know there was a contract until so many years later, out in the desert near Joshua Tree.
Oh my goodness, that makes me want to cry. And I'm warning you, I should have warned you before we started recording. I cry. Oh my goodness. Oh, isn't it amazing how the universe works? I'm just gonna like, I don't know if you've noticed, but my last name, Berger, is a German Jewish name. I don't know if you know this. Um, so I am not, in fact, Jewish because my mother was not Jewish. But my lineage of conservative Christians is descended from Johann, and I don't speak German, so I'm not going to try to say my last name as it's truly pronounced, but Johann Berger, who was the son of a Jewish man, a German Jewish man who came to the United States in 1870. So I'm just the fact that there is even a vestige of Jewish lineage. And then when you're sharing this, so I feel this sense of connection there. And then I also feel this sense of connection when you talk about your mother. I mean, my mother had an undiagnosed major depressive disorder. And and after my brother's suicide, my mother became suicidal. So I very much found myself in the role of feeling like from the time of a very young age, feeling like it was my job to keep my mother on this side of sane, and yet at some point also beginning to struggle and learn what is psychological abuse and what is emotional abuse and what is what are the various types of abuse and what's okay and what's not okay. And then in this constant, like once I reached probably age 17 or 18, in this constant battle until the time of her death around establishing boundaries and what was abuse and what is not abuse and what's okay and what's not okay and how to be in a relationship. And so I'm just saying the power of what you shared. It hits my heart, I just am floored by it. So thank you for sharing that passage. You know.
Oh, well, Habib, I feel kind of goosebumps in our connections because I knew that you too, I mean, I certainly knew that you had taken an unlikely path from conservative Christianity to mystical Islam, and I felt we were connected that way. But
Yeah.
of course, I had no idea we were connected in so many other ways. So that's lovely, and it touches me, and I completely understand the challenge with boundaries with parents with mental illness. And, I lived that through much of my life with my mother.
Yeah.
And, and, a constant, never a one and done learning with that,
Right.
just ongoing challenge.
Right. Yeah. And so And so heartbreaking and so challenging to live with and to grow with and to, continually reorient yourself to growth rather than giving up or giving in. So, will you share that your happiness or unhappiness is more a function of your thoughts or actions? Would you share that one more time?
Yes. Yeah. So this is slightly adjusted from the original language.
Mm,
Um, Buddhism has no, not, there are a number of kind of Western Buddhists who reject the idea of karma and the complexity of karma, but it certainly is in there in most Buddhist philosophy. Um,
mhm,
so this is a slightly watered down version of the actual phrases that we used back then. This
mhm,
retreat, we're talking 40 years ago, this happened,
mhm, mhm,
or so. So your happiness or unhappiness is more a function of your thoughts and actions than of my wishes for you. And yet, I will never cease to wish for your happiness.
mhm. I love that. And yet, I will never cease to wish for your happiness. So this is great for practicing equanimity in relation to someone else. So my question is, what if you're struggling? And I think that we talked about this when you were in the process of doing the interviews for your book, Quiet Strength, right? Um, so we talked about the Sufi perspective around not making the difference between the Jamal and the Jalal. Those are the words that are often translated as the majesty and the beauty, or the severity and the gentleness. But those opposing streams, and that part of Sufism, and how Sufis relate to the idea of peace is in allowing, um, as seeing both as the divine's invitation to draw closer to the divine, right? And so to stop making difference between them and to care less about, oh, this is not what I want and my ego self, but more about opening to the invitation of drawing nearer to your Buddha nature, source in Sufism, Allah, in accordance with your tradition, however you might language that. So I personally struggle with this, and I think every person does. And I feel that that struggle is lifelong, that it's not something where I've just reached equanimity and I've got it for the rest of my life. But I especially struggle in terms of dealing with chronic pain, chronic health challenges that started when I was a teenager, and I struggle in terms of being present with my symptomology and maintaining a sense of equanimity. And every time I think, oh, I've got it, every time my ego kicks in and says, oh, you are doing so great at not being in reaction and not differentiating, just accepting the pain, accepting your inability to move in this moment or whatever. As soon as like my ego comes in and I congratulate myself, bam, there it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have a similar affirmation or phrase or thought for practicing equanimity in relation to your own um, experience, whether that be your own inner turmoil, emotional turmoil, or mental turmoil, or physical turmoil, or all of the above?
Wow. Okay. Well, yes. And again, of course, I completely relate to your question, and it's fun reflecting back on our conversation, it was quite a while ago now. Um, and I will say that there are different aspects and dimensions of equanimity. And this aspect that you're referring to of seeing what we call in Buddhism, we would call the eight vicissitudes,
Mm,
pleasure and pain, gain and loss, these poles, these seeming dualities of
mhm,
pleasant and unpleasant, and uh, being able to hold them both,
mhm.
open to the paradox of both of them being a part of life,
Yeah.
is such a big part, as you said, of the spiritual path. And it's how equanimity is understood across all religions, as far as I can tell, is in
Mm,
relationship to these polar dimensions that we're constantly confronted with. I mean, what I like about the eight worldly winds is how much it normalizes the constancy of change, that
mhm,
they're always blowing pleasant, unpleasant, pleasant, unpleasant. And
mhm.
that helps me, as you said, to take it less personally. And, which is the first place that we lose equanimity is,
Yeah.
but something that's helped me a great deal as I've marinated in this idea of equanimity for
Mm,
the last 3 or 4 years is that I think of it more about recovery time than maintaining any particular state,
mm,
because that doesn't exist in nature or anywhere else. And there's no such thing as a static balance.
mhm.
That's like stagnation. And like
Right,
we don't want to aim for that. That's death. We want
right.
dynamic balance. And so dynamic equanimity is the recovery of balance. We're constantly losing balance all the time.
Yeah.
Walking, we lose balance with every step and recover it. And then it's kind of how resilience and equanimity has to do with how quickly you can recover balance. And to me, that ability to laugh at the the ubiquity and greediness of the ego, that really speeds up recovery time. That makes it happen so fast when you can laugh
Yeah.
at it and see there it is.
Yeah.
Um, you actually, I want to read back a quote from you
Okay.
that I put in my book. I
Okay.
really, really love about this. Um, and I pulled it up knowing I was going to talk to you. I love this quote. I've quoted you often, and you said, one of the ways I think about the spiritual journey is a process of befriending the ego and the ego learning to trust, then changing your relationship to the ego from being your boss to being your personal assistant.
Mm,
So it's not like it goes away,
mhm,
and we don't want it to go away. And there it is, and it's relentlessly trying to identify and solidify itself around impermanence and constantly changing experience. And so to me, like a great equanimity practice is to laugh
mm,
when you can. I actually have a chapter on humor as a doorway to equanimity, and I interviewed Swami Byandananda for this chapter, um, because he's the person who has really used humor as a doorway. In some ways, we're saying equanimity is, I don't want to be as grandiose to say that it's the same thing as enlightenment, but it's certainly a kind of spacious way of relating to experience that um, is not the same as when we're ego contracted around our pain, our physical pain, our story, whatever it might be. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah. Oh, it's too funny that you brought my own my my own words back to the in response to the question. I can't help but think of all the times where I am reminding that myself and others that I feel like that so much of the spiritual path is bringing the light of the soul to, this is a different way of saying the same thing, but bringing the light of soul to the ego and through the doorway of the heart and
Mhm.
allow it, and bringing that, because it's, if the ego can experience the light of the soul, then it can relax and it can go, oh, there's beauty here and love here and light here, and it can relax into that. And
I
it's
love that.
and
I
it's
love
not
that.
and
And
it's not always easy. And as you said, um, it's dynamic. Did you use the term dynamic balance? Um,
mhm,
yes. And it's so interesting because I feel like, oh, I forget more often when it comes in relation to my own state that every emotional experience, and this is probably a bit different from a Buddhist perspective or from a mindfulness perspective that is more around allowing things to just be released. But I often think of thoughts and emotions as constantly giving us invitations, and either inviting us toward our ego self or inviting us toward our higher self, or
mm,
so it's either lower self or true self, or however you want to language that. And sometimes in relation to my emotions, I can say, oh, well, the length of that reaction, emotional reaction, is much, or the weight of that emotional reaction has reduced over time. Like this is like I feel like, oh, I'm progressing, I'm making difference, I'm growing, I'm transforming, I'm healing. It has um, less weight. It hangs around. And whenever I'm talking about compassion, I often share with people who struggle with this, it's not that you will ever stop being an emotional human being, because part of being human is having emotions, and those emotions serve very holy purposes. They are these beautiful invitations to go to our true self if we choose to take them up on it. And having, I love that idea of the balance and the resiliency coming with the accepting and having some laughter and joy around that acceptance of how the negotiation and the process of befriending our egos is a ubiquitous one that lasts as long as we have life and thought, that it's part of the human experience. And in just embracing the bounce back period, the rebalance period. So I really appreciate, this is my long-winded way of saying I really appreciate that reminder of reframing our, I think it's our ego that wants to attach to the idea of the state of equanimity when we face those things, as opposed to embracing the rebalance period, or the
yes, so
yeah.
true. And it's so true. And, I had to ask myself some challenging questions as I wrote the book. Like if I'm having physical pain, like you talked about, and I
Mhm.
hate the pain, can I be equanimous with hating the pain?
Mm,
Or do I have to, is equanimity more narrow than that? Can equanimity be big enough to hold that I hate this pain? And then what happens to hating the pain if I approach that as a manifestation, potential manifestation of equanimity, and not somehow the opposite of equanimity.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a, forgive my French, it's a little bit of a, but I had to give a talk on equanimity, and the moment was, I write about this in the book, I was really brokenhearted.
Hmm.
Stuff had happened. I had a broken heart, and I
Hmm.
was giving a talk on equanimity. And I had to ask myself, can I be a quantumist with a broken heart?
Hmm.
And of course, the answer was yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Equanimity is not a posture that looks a particular way where, yeah, I'm chill with everything. Whatever,
Hmm.
yeah, pain, pleasure, it's all good. Yeah, man, that, you know, equanimity is finding a way to hold this, as you reminded me in Sufism, even these great, beauty and great awesomeness that can be fearsome and
Yeah.
very, very challenging.
Yeah. Mm. What do you think about a little mini practice, a little short practice? Would you be willing to lead us in a short practice on equanimity?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be
Yeah.
happy to do that. I'd be
Okay.
happy to do that. So yeah, so I'll just take under 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yes. If you don't,
Okay.
I'm not sure what time we started. I do a
Yeah.
terrible job of keeping track of that, but I do think that
Okay.
we're getting close to an hour. So,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll do a very short equanimity practice, and um, I invite you to either close your eyes or just lower your gaze, kind of to signal internal movement, to withdraw your senses from the outer world, to move inside, and take a couple of deep breaths, and kind of soothe the nervous system, gather yourself in the present moment. And then release the breath to its natural rhythm. And now bring to mind a person that you love, a person who's easy to love. And whoever that is, a friend, a partner, a child, a family member, recognizing how, like every life, their lives have joys and sorrows, successes and failures, health and illness. And see if you can touch into the place in your heart that truly wishes them well, that wants the best for them. And bringing to mind a challenge they may be facing in this short context now, probably not a major challenge, whatever feels manageable to you. Difficulty at work, difficulty in a relationship, and see if you can notice the place in your heart that really feels compassion and wants to help, maybe even wants to fix their situation. It's so natural and such a beautiful quality of the heart. And reflecting for a moment on how their happiness and unhappiness are more a function of their own thoughts, their own actions, their own circumstances than of your wishes for them. See if you can find the truth in that statement, both for yourself and for the people you love. And then wishing them well while fully understanding the limits of your power to enforce their happiness, to fix what they're struggling with. Understanding that your happiness or unhappiness has more to do with your thoughts, your actions, your circumstances. I will never stop wishing you well. May you be happy. May you find peace. May you love and be loved. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. And that will close our short practice.
Thank you. Oh, I could bask in that a little bit longer. Thank you for leading us in that practice and for being flexible about doing it in a short one. Appreciate that. Well, it's absolutely been a delight to reconnect with you, and I wish you the greatest success with Quiet Strength, your upcoming book.
You. Thank you.
And and I really appreciate you coming on Beyond Names and being a part of this impetus to share a message of love, of of unity, and of wishing everyone well. Whatever their journey might be, however their journey might look, wherever they are in this moment. So thank you so much for so readily embodying that and being a part of it and sharing in that. So
Thank you, Habib. It's really been a pleasure to share and to reconnect with you. So thank you again for the invitation.
absolutely. And thank you to all listeners for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go, if you would please take one breath to just pause and reflect for a moment on what stays with you from this conversation with Margaret. May something you heard today help you reconnect with the light in your own heart. May you grow in compassion, clarity, and courage and equanimity. May you find your way again and again back home to yourself, back home to the divine, however you name it. If today's conversation spoke to you, please like, share, comment on this episode, and please follow Beyond Names. To make an appointment with me, please visit habibboerger.com. Until next time, may you be light, may you consciously participate in growing your light, and may you share your light. Peace be with you.